So now let us finally move to the most ambitious and probably objectively the best move in this position, knight c3. So I can recommend you, if you want to fight really for an opening advantage, I mean, trying to play the most principal lines, to go for that. It for many years and still considers to be, well, the most difficult move to face with black. But of course, you need to know that after knight c3, very often the positions are very complicated, strategically complicated. You need to know a lot of theory here. So if you are not ready for it, then you should probably try to choose some other line. But objectively, according to the modern state of theory, black is experiencing some problems here, even though, of course, also he has quite a rich choice of options, and situation is quite unclear. I mean, practically, because there are many positions which are maybe objectively somewhat better for white, but they're extremely complicated. So you will see now that it's very interesting, actually, variation, both after the main two main lines, knight f6 and bishop b4. In both cases, positions are very rich and very complicated, but there is quite a serious strategical risk here for black. So the thing is that all those moves like c5, for instance, the move which worked well against knight d2, now it doesn't work anymore because knight on c3 is much more active. Obviously attacking the center. So after e d5, here white is better. Simply, let's say after taking back on d5, now bishop b5 check, knight c6, knight f3, for instance, is already a totally different story because the pawn on d5 is very often starts to be attacked quickly compared to the variation to the position with where the white knight here is on d2. So here white is better, and also even I'm not quite sure that after d takes c5, knight f6, bishop e3, that black will actually manage to get back this pawn. For instance, knight c6, knight f3, bishop b5, and white is, according to theory, white is just better here. So c5 is not recommended. Okay, from time to time, black is playing all kind of moves like a6 or knight c6. All those moves are obviously not losing by force, so to say, but it's clear that white should be just better, just playing the normal healthy chess, knight f3, bishop d3, whatever. So finally, there is a choice of those two main lines, which I've mentioned already, and there is d line, which is d94. That is a very compact repertoire for black to play d4, because you can do it also against third knight d2. You can also take on e4, knight takes e4. So in this sense, it makes, it has a point to play this line with black. And also, what is positive here from the black side, that his play is rather understandable, in this variation. So usually plays knight d7 here, preparing knight f6, and then after exchanging the knights, very often then black is trying to play c5 to exchange this c pawn to white's d pawn and finish his development. Then this pawn structure is very solid, and he should be okay if he manages all those goals. But the minus of this variation, that it's quite passive, I would say. So black is just trying to play for equality. It doesn't have often too many chances to play for a win in this variation, but that is okay, because you're playing black. That is, what to do. It's not the main problem, of the opening line of, which is in your black's repertoire. More of a problem is that white has quite a wide choice of different setups here, and different also in nature. So white can try just to play very solid positional chess, being a little bit better, maybe close to equality, but still having certain pressure without any risk. Or he can try to choose some more aggressive ways of playing, which are also pretty dangerous. So all in all, for black, if you decide to include it in your repertoire, it's absolutely essential in this variation to, for the next coming few moves, to know exactly all the move orders, because it's, as you will see, it's easy to end up in a very dangerous position out of the opening. But if you study it well, if you like the type of game which is often happening in this variation, it's perfectly playable. So I can recommend you, if you want to include it in your black's repertoire, to study the games of a strong German grandmaster, George Meyer, who had played it a lot during his career, and he knows all the ins and outs of this line. Even though from time to time he would still experience some painful defeats or some troubles out of the openings, but he has probably the best knowledge of this variation. So check his games if you want to know what to do against all those numerous tries which white has in this variation. So logical is to play knight f3, even though I can say that, for instance, there is a move g4, as strange as it might look, but it also makes sense. It's not so easy to equalize with black after g4, but normally it shouldn't be the move which refutes this setup. It just to show you how many different options white has in this variation. So knight f3, knight gf6, and now again, depending on the style or preference of white players. So if you're playing white, I can tell you that there is a choice of different options for white. So you should choose it according to your liking, style, and so on. So whether you go for something more active, direct, and maybe trying to play with a long castle, or you can just play solid. For instance, bishop d3 is a line where white, I think, keeps some plus, and which is purely positional, no risk, but maybe a little bit less aggressive. So bishop d3, usually c5 black is playing, because if you first take a knight f6, then bishop g5, and white will give up this bishop and keep his bishop on e4. So he will take on f6. For instance, after h6, he just takes on f6, plays queen e2, and of course black has two bishops, but white has a big development advantage, and probably he's better here. That's why usually black starts with c5. It's a bit more accurate. And now, of course, possible to take on f6. This is one of the possible lines, which you can achieve just taking on f6 immediately on move, instead of playing bishop d3. But that considers to be okay for black, even though you need to know theory again here. White has quite a dangerous setup. Let's say playing queen e2, castles, bishop d2. Just preparing long castle, and you see that, the bishops are very, especially the bishop on d3 is looking on the king side, and it's easy to get under very dangerous attack with black. But you need, again, as very often in this variation, as black, you need to know move per move how to react against, especially against those plans where your opponent wants to castle long. Here, for example, I think e5 is a move which is equalizing, but you need to know a few more lines here, but e5 is a very important move. So which probably makes this queen e2, bishop d2 setup harmful finally, but otherwise it could have been very dangerous. So that's why after c5 castles, now take knight f6, bishop g5, c takes d4. That is a kind of one of the main lines of this variation. Bishop e7, bishop f3. So, and now, castles, black usually castles, and then white has many different options, rook e1, c3, lots of different moves. You see, I mean, when white castles short in this variation, that is, I mean, not, I mean, so dangerous in a way, yeah, for black. But from other point of view, here, you know, the difference compared to those positions where the bishop is on d3, here the bishop is very annoying, yeah, on this diagonal, and black, even if he is in general doing well positionally, but he still has a problem, development problem, yeah, how to. So you need to make sure here that one day, sooner or later, but you'll manage to get out with your bishop on c8. That's why here you need to know the theory pretty well. So better don't play this line if you haven't studied it carefully, because it's easy to end up just with this bishop on c8 and rook on a8 for the rest of your game, for the rest of the game. But according to theory, and again, you can have a look at the games of Grandmaster Mayer, I think he was finally always managing to do it with a very accurate play, and probably black is very close to equalize here. From other point of view, with white is also, well, quite a pleasant try. You can try here, and no risk for white, and if black is not is doing something a little bit imprecise, you can end up just having a very serious positional advantage. So that is a safe way of playing, one of the safe ways of playing. Normally white is taken on f6, takes, and now again has a big range of options. Well, bishop d3, as I've mentioned already, yeah, that leads to this variation. After c5 takes, and now bishop d2, e5 is fine for black. So bishop d3 is not so dangerous. Bishop g5, yeah, it's playable, but also not a very big deal, I would say, because, for instance, h6 is possible, and if bishop h4, c5 seems to be just perfectly fine. White has some maybe tries like taking on f6, queen f6, and then trying to play long castle this or that way, maybe bishop d3 first. But all in all, also, it shouldn't be really dangerous. And also c5 immediately seems to be okay. But yeah, in general, this line c5 and bishop b5 check, bishop d7. White tried here to get something, but for the moment without big success. So I think that is probably not that dangerous bishop g5 move. Then there is a recently became quite fashionable to play knight e5. So you see white's, so this is one of those aggressive plans where white wants to stop black from playing c5, because here c5 is at minimum dubious because of bishop b5 check, yeah, which causes a lot of discomfort for black, to put it mildly. Yeah? So probably you have to play knight d7, and yeah, this doesn't look great. All those spins, white has a huge development advantage. So that's why after knight d5, well, there are different ways, but options, but knight d7 is maybe the most logical, just trying to get rid of this knight. Then white is trying to play knight c4, you know, and so on. So this is a possible way of playing for white, quite an interesting option. You can investigate it if you want to study this variation with white. I also find bishop e3 move is actually very dangerous. Bishop e3, because yeah, that's an idea. You're trying to stop c5 and preparing long castle. So the main line now goes like this: bishop d6, bishop d3, castles, queen e2. Of course, I would in general, with white, since I already play long castle, of course I would prefer to have the bishop on g5, but then, as we've seen already, then black could manage to get c5 quickly. Yeah? So like this, with bishop on e3, you're stopping c5 at least for the moment, and then preparing this aggressive play on the king side. So usually black is playing b6, long castle, bishop b7, and then, so the idea is that white tries to organize some dangerous attack on the king side. Let's say king b1 or knight e5. Black has to try to play c5 to manage c5, otherwise he will be in trouble. And I think here even immediately c5 is the main line, if I remember correctly. Okay, all in all, this position is is very tricky, quite dangerous for black, but I don't recommend you playing it black without careful study without studying it carefully. But maybe black finally is okay at the end of the day, if he plays very precisely, but white has quite a number of options in this position, and a very interesting variation to to have in your white repertoire if you want to really to get a very to get this type of position where you have a chance of really creating a very direct dangerous attack on the king of your opponent. So a very, very important variation in my opinion, bishop e3. And then lately c3 became maybe the most even popular move nowadays. So the idea is that if black is playing bishop d6, in the same fashion, then bishop d3, for example, castles, and already bishop g5. So same type of position, but bishop on g5 is of course causing more damage to black's position, is much more active, and c3 in general is a useful move here. So here still it is playable for black. It's not bad, but even more dangerous than the previous line. And I think according to the state of the theory is that black is experiencing problems here. It cannot really fully equalize. So that's why after c3, maybe c5 is a safer choice. And now bishop e3 is probably the most interesting, the main line. Well, the idea is that after c takes d4, now white can take with the bishop on d4, and that's very important. That's a very important point, that because bishop is very strong on d4. So let's say bishop e7, bishop d3, castles queen e2, and there is a very big difference of this position whether you take with a knight on d4 or bishop, because then you can have either short castle, but maybe even more dangerous long castle then, and the attack can become very dangerous quickly, with this very powerful bishop. So that's why after bishop e3, usually black is playing queen c7 again, because let's say if knight d5, which would be logical, but I think the problem is bishop b5 check, at least one of the problems here, takes maybe, and just knight e5. And you have some very direct issues with a diagonal. Queen a4 check is, if queen goes somewhere to c7, is a problem. So that's why at least the main, according to theory, queen c7 is the best move. And now one of the possible ways for white to play, not the only one, but at least the most popular, is to play knight e5. So trying to go bishop b5 check, you see very direct play, just trying to make use of the slight development advantage which white has. So a6, queen a4 check, knight d7. This is at least the main line, theoretical main line. Bishop b5, and then it goes on and on. Here the theory, hard to say if black can manage to equalize fully, but all in all, it's clear that black is just fighting for a draw here. If you study it very carefully, as Josh Mayer did, and he made quite a number of draws already in this position, but you have to suffer a bit and to be extremely precise to equalize fully here. So all in all, again, the line which is definitely possible to have in your repertoire, in your black repertoire, then the question is if it's wishable. It depends on your attitude towards the opening. So if you like this simple play where you know exactly your plan and you're ready to study all those move orders, all those nuances, and you feel comfortable, maybe being sometimes slightly worse, but at least without weaknesses, and strategically with a very solid pawn structure, that can be definitely fine. I mean, why not to include it in your repertoire? And with white, I would say that, here it's yeah, definitely this slide will not cause you trouble, because white has, as you've seen already, quite a number of interesting options, choices, how to fight for opening advantage. So now let's move to the knight c3 bishop b4 variation. Actually, I find it very extremely interesting and very original opening variation in the whole theory, chess theory, because the positions which often arise here are really special and very non-standard, with a mixture of tactics. So there is a lot of theory, quite a number of direct lines which you need to know and analyze and memorize. But also it's essential to have a general strategical understanding of those type of position, especially, of course, when white is playing e5, which is the most dangerous move in here. So if you want to play it with black, you really need to, so to say, get into it. You really need to know what you are doing. You need to get the feeling on top of some direct, knowing some direct lines, also to get the feeling of those positions, because they are dangerous, strategically very dangerous for black. It's clear that most of the time black has to give up his bishop, and then, white has two bishops advantage, very often quite a dangerous initiative, an attack against black's king, but black has his own play. So all in all, black's position is probably, I don't know if it's enough to equalize objectively, but it's definitely better than it looks in the main lines. But again, the strategical danger is very serious. So understanding the main strategical ideas there is essential, and I will try in this limited amount of time try to explain you what should you aim for and what you should try to avoid playing black, also of course for white here. But all in all, a very special opening line, I would say. So e5 is the main move. Of course, if you're white and if you don't want to get into complex strategical positions, or you don't want to learn too much theory, you can always play e takes d5. It's a very solid line, takes and bishop d3. So a slightly better version of the so-called exchange variation in French, which is the third e takes d5. So white has a bit more chances for opening, for slight opening advantage here, because the bishop on b4 is not probably very well placed, but still also knight on c3 is probably not the best in this position. So still, maximum you can get a very small plus here, but at least you know that you are very safe here. So if you want with white to be safe, you can study e takes d5. Otherwise, e5 or also a3 is actually an interesting line, slightly forgotten already nowadays. Maybe rightly so, because objectively black is okay, I think, there. But he doesn't have so much choice, because taking on c3 already is, of course, necessary. Takes on c3, d takes c4, and white is getting this pawn back, playing queen g4. And if black wants to equalize here, to have a good counter chances, he needs to play knight f6, giving up the g7 pawn. Queen takes g7, rook g8, queen h6. And this position is very chaotic, very strange. You rather don't play it if you haven't studied it carefully. But all in all, according to the theory, black is doing fine in this position. There are different ways of playing. I think knight bd7 is possible move, but I suppose hc5 was the old main line and probably still the main move here. A very strange position again. If it's to your liking, there is much less theory here, and if it's to your liking, this type of game, and if you don't want to study all those main theory, you can give it a try with white. But objectively, it shouldn't cause black too many problems. So e5 is definitely the main move. And c5. So that is the idea of the whole operation. Started with bishop b4 is immediately to challenge white's center. Sometimes knight e7 is played with the idea after a3, take on c3, takes. Of course, you can transpose with c5 here, but b6. Actually, this is one of the very important strategical ideas for black in the whole line, is to try to exchange the bishops, and that would be definitely very useful for black, exchanging the white square bishops. But queen g4. Queen g4 is maybe the only but seriously challenging move. Also very typical, as you will see later on. It's a very typical idea of white, and actually very logical, since black has moved his bishop away from f8. So now the g7 pawn is under attack, and it's becoming much more difficult to keep control on the king side for black without that black square bishop. So queen g4 causes quite some problems. I think knight g6 considers to be the main move. Castles is at minimum dangerous, if not just bad, because very typically, white starts to develop a very dangerous attack here, maybe like playing bishop g5, already threatening bishop f6. So if you already castle, then better to do it with a pawn on c5 instead of b6, which is one of the lines we are going to consider later. If black is playing knight f5, then he starts to have problems after bishop d3. Again, the pawn on g7 is hanging, and he will probably have to play h5, weakening a bit more his position. This g5 square becomes rather weak, and white has a move like queen f4, maybe even other moves like queen e2 possible to check, just to stop bishop a6. So that is dubious. That's why black plays knight g6, and he is ready to get his bishop a6 to change the bishops. But h4 also, as you will see later, very typical way for white to play those positions because white has full control in the center. He doesn't need to hurry very often castling with his king, and very often white's king keeps on staying in the center for the rest of the game, and white tries to develop his play very quickly on the king side. So h5 is threatening, so black has to do it. h5, queen g3, bishop a6. That was the whole idea of this variation. But now the problem is that, for example, takes, maybe starting with queen d3, just to bother the knight. Probably knight would go to b8 back, and then something like this: bishop g5, queen d7, knight e2. Strategically, black is doing pretty well here, because white has all those weaknesses on the king side, and no white square bishops. So if black would have just managed to solve his problem with the king, he would have been doing well. But the problem is that what to do with the king, because bishop on g5, so you cannot make long castle very often. Short castle also, you can get mated very quickly, and h5 pawn will fall. So then black has maybe quite often he's trying to get queen a4, king to d7, but also white has a number of very dangerous options like knight g3, queen f3, trying to attack the pawn on h5, or even simply pushing f4, f5, like castle f4, f5, breaking through there. So all in all, I think that this line, I've played it myself once or twice in rapid chess, but objectively, it's not completely sound for black, even though, of course, as a surprise, it's playable. You can try it, but in general, white should be better here. That's why c5 is played. a3. Queen g4, a very typical idea of this variation. Here it's a bit premature because black can simply play knight e7 in this position, and white is not in time to take on g7 because cd4, so there is an issue with the center. Black is doing fine here. That's why after c5, definitely the best move is a3. And now white has a certain choice. Taking on c3 is definitely the main line, by far the most popular move. C takes d4 doesn't work so well. Actually, before takes on c3. The idea is that if bc, black wants quickly to attack those pawns and might be doing fine. But actually, the problem is that white can simply, on top of very aggressive moves like queen g4, which also has to be considered, but even if he just playing quietly, he has a very powerful initiative. So black will take on b2 sooner or later, here at some point, at least clearly cb2, bishop b2, and in fact, white has definitely enough, but in reality, more than enough compensation for the pawns because has two bishops, control on the black squares. The typical French black bishop is very difficult to activate one day, and to castle is, you can easily get mated at some point. So all in all, this is the c takes d4 is already not really played, at least on the serious professional level. It's totally out of practice now because the positions are pretty set for black here. But bishop a5 is playable. It's a playable line. There is no direct refutation of this variation, bishop a5, and white needs to know what he is doing here. I think that the main line here, which I'm going to show you, is maybe the most unpleasant for black, because everything else is probably playable. Let's say if bishop d2, this is what I can recommend you if you want to have it very safe. I mean, something without too much theory. Bishop d2 is playable. So now it goes like this: knight c6, usually played knight b5, knight takes d4. Because if c takes d4, then white at some point f4 or something, then he will check on d6, and probably black will have some problems. So that's why knight takes d4, exchanging this knight takes d4, c takes d4. That is the main theory. Bishop b5 check, bishop d7. So white is using tactically the opportunity to get black's king, into the center. But knight f3, let's say bishop b6. But at the same time, black is, for the moment, pawn up, and white still needs time to get back this pawn. And because of the rather closed pawn structure, it's difficult to make use of this king in the center. So I think black should be okay, but white can also try here. For instance, a4, something very quick and aggressive, trying to play a5 castles, knight e7, and b4. For instance, I think that according to the engines and the practice, black is okay here, but he needs to be careful a bit. So that is a line you need to know with black, but probably it's fine. Finally, at the end of the day, d takes c5 is also not dangerous because black is just in time to attack the center with those moves, attacking both pawns, and after c4, just one nuance, the best move is knight e7. So before taking one of those pawns, e5 or c5, you first protect your d5 pawn, and black is equalizing here. So the best move is considered to be b4 here. So you see a very, already by those lines, and we haven't yet come to the main variations, that you see that the play is very original here. Move like b4 is not the first move which comes to your mind if you don't know the theory, which means that you, on top of everything, you need really to know exactly, the theory here, move per move, understand the move orders. Otherwise, it's difficult sometimes to find the best theoretical moves over the board. It's not like Queen's Gambit, quiet position where even if you forget something, you can just, play healthy, logical moves. Here, you better know exactly what you are doing. So b4, now the point is that after cb4 is dubious and not really played anymore, because after knight b5, finally knight is getting to d6, and white always has just a very powerful long-term compensation. On top of the fact that it's with black, it's easy to get under direct attack here with his king staying in the center. But in any case, even if not that, white will always have a lot of play. So here, I think this line I would not recommend you. with black to take on b4. So everybody nowadays taking on d4. And white has a choice of two main, at least, options here, which is queen g4, knight b5. I would say knight b5 is more positional. Queen g4 is a more maybe aggressive and more principal line. So it's like white is trying to refute black's play with this move. And the old main line goes like this, knight e7. Okay, don't ask me why. It's a very strange play. So, but it's approved by the computer also, and there were, thousands of games on it already. So just you need to memorize it. Yeah, that queen g4, knight e7, ba5, dc3, queen takes g7, rook g8, queen h7. That is pretty forced. Knight bc6, knight f3. And now this is one of very strange type of positions which arise in a few variations of this bishop b4 line, which are, well, very complicated, and you really need to better, move per move, what do you do in these positions. But if you are talking about it in general terms, I would say that, well, white has two bishops, and the main asset is this h-pawn. Very often white is just keeping his king on the center and starting to push h-pawn very quickly, in many lines, just trying to queen it. So the black's advantage is that, of course, white is not very well developed. His king is on the center, and actually it's very difficult to evacuate the king from e1 to some very safe place. So white has a lot of tactical ideas here, and there are always chances to organize a very direct, dangerous attack against white's king. But all in all, this particular position is probably in white's favor. There was a lot of games here, and I will just show you the main line, which is queen c7, bishop f4, bishop d7. And now don't ask me why a6 is the best move in this position. So a very, very strange play. And again, I think the player who knows theory better, but even especially who feels this position, who gets the feeling of this position, he will probably prevail in this play. Talking from a practical point of view, if you are talking from the theoretical point of view, objectively, probably white is better here. But I think recently some players started to play king f8 in this position, and by the way, not a bad idea. King f8, I mean, not so easy to refute it. In fact, I think usually white plays knight b5, bishop b6, knight f3. And of course, typical. Your king lost the right to castle, so it's a kind of long-term problem from black. But from other point of view, white's center is shaky now, so he needs still time to take the pawn back on d4. So black has sometimes potential ideas to like f6, to get some play in the center. So this position is. I had a look at it at some point. I don't remember already whether for white or for black. I wanted to to analyze it to see what is the assessment here. If I remember correctly, the play was very, very concrete and very sharp. And at the end of the day, black had, decent chances to equalize here, but with extremely accurate play. So one wrong move and immediately you are in big trouble. From other point, I would say that it can be said about almost every line in this bishop b4 system. So maybe it's queen g4 is a very principled, very aggressive move, but maybe black is doing more or less fine here at least. What I find unpleasant is knight b5 actually for black, because here white's play is rather simple. And strategically sound. So bishop c7 have to be played because just not to allow bishop knight d6 check. f4. So white's idea is just to develop knight f3, bishop d3, bishop b2 at some point to take back the pawn on d4 and just to have a nice strategically sound position. I think you can, if it's to your liking, this variation, I think with an extremely precise play, black has chances to equalize here. You should check the games, especially of top players on this variation, But all in all, I would say that it's much easier to play it with white because white's plan is very clear and simple, and black has to really invent something special to oppose white's very healthy play and to get decent counter chances. For instance, knight c6, knight f3, knight e7, bishop d3. Then if a6, you just take on c7, you castle. Sooner or later, you take the pawn on d4. It will be very difficult for white to keep it alive. For black to keep it alive. And white has quite some initiative. So if you want to play this variation with black, you should really find some way, very precise way how to proceed in this position. I think one of it is bishop d7. That's a bit more fashionable nowadays, and trying maybe in this situation, if knight e6, bishop d3, stopping knight e5. Sometimes I saw some players trying to play bishop a4, then knight c6. I'm not a big fan of this position for black in general, but if I remember correctly, black had one or two options to which would give him chances to equalize here. But all in all, I find this line mainly difficult, for black, mainly because of this b4 and knight b5. So that's why bishop takes c3 is by far the main line. Here, b takes c3. And now, very strange position. I mean, black gave up a very important black square bishop for the knight. A strange operation from one point of view, of course, damaged white's pawn structure. From other point of view, not so badly, because white can still protect all those pawns in the center. Frankly, I always found, before really studying this line, I always found it very illogical, and I always had a feeling that it must be better for white normally. Normally you don't play like this in the opening. You kind of, you play e6, d5, you have a white square bishop which is always a problem, in such structures, and then you gave up your black square bishop. Not logical, but when you start to analyze it, this variation, you understand that things are not so simple. So black's main problem, as I've mentioned already, is black squares and the king side. So white is very often trying to organize very quick offense on the king side. But black has his counterplay especially connected with those weak pawns. Sometimes, he can get the pawn on c4 in some situations, some variations you will see, and limiting the white bishop on f1. And those positions are in general normally in white's favor, but there are some situations where those positions are not so easy. So all in all, let's check the theory. Okay, knight e7, I would say, is the main line. Black can start with queen c7, and sometimes it does. And now queen g4 is the main move. Again, white can always play knight f3. We will come back to it later in the knight e7 line. But I consider queen g4 is the main move in both, after both queen c7 and knight e7. And there is this typical issue now with the g7 pawn, what to do with this pawn. There are some variations. Black sometimes plays f5 or even f6, but according to theory, it's not enough to equalize. Maybe cd4 simply doesn't work. Queen takes g7. That kind of things you need to just know, because looks like black has queen takes c3 check, and rook on a1 is hanging, but it's just bad for black. Take on a1, take on h8, and it's white is winning. So probably here, objectively, the best is just to play knight e7 and to transpose to the main line. And if king f8, Yeah, in general, most of the time, when black loses a right to castle and king is on f8, then white, in my opinion, yeah, because this position strategically, I guess different players can have different vision of it. And I saw, for example, Wesley saw he played this type of game, playing king f8 after queen g4. So and more than once, I believe. So probably he thinks that this is very playable. To my understanding, once the king is on f8, white can just start to play very positional, even coming back with his queen on d1, and just start to play knight f3, because it's extremely difficult to solve this problem with the king on f8 now. What to do, how to activate the rook on h8, and because even if you play h6, king g8, king h7, it takes a lot of time, and there is bishop d3 check coming. So white just tries to develop. Black, probably the best is to play b6, bishop a6. As I've mentioned already, it's one of the main strategical ideas for black in this position. But then a4, for instance, so waiting for bishop a6, then you just take on a6, you castle, and if black king would have been on a8, then probably black would play h6, castle, and having a good game normally. But here, of course, it's very important for black to exchange this bishop. But because of this king on f8, it's extremely difficult to play this position, because what to do with this king and rook. So probably black will sooner or later play h6, try to get the king on h7, even though there is always check possible. So he'll have to lose a lot of tempis to coordinate his rooks, and to get king to the safe place. And usually white is in time by then, to start queen e2 and start some actions on the king side, break through on the king side. And you should notice that here, once you play c4, then on top of everything, the bishop gets to this diagonal, and situation becomes pretty critical. So all in all, I'm not a big fan of this king f8, knight e7, king f8, or queen c7, king f8. So probably after queen c7, queen g4, I would recommend you to play knight e7, but then maybe it's better to start with knight e7. Although there is one line which started to be, quite fashionable. Now it went out of fashion for no particular reason, in my opinion, which is queen a5, attacking the pawn, bishop d2, queen a4. Yeah, you see how strange is this variation. So all of a sudden, instead of developing his pieces, black is just making two moves with his queen, not really even threatening to take on d4, in fact. But it makes some sense, because the main idea is that black wants to get b6, bishop a6, and also, of course, bishop on d2 is not, it's not so well placed. It's okay, but probably in general, white would rather prefer to have a4, bishop a3 at some point, trying to get to this diagonal. So this variation, I don't know if it's not enough to equalize fully, but it's not too bad, definitely not too bad. It's playable if you like, in general, if you're ready to play this type of position with black at all. And there is much less theory. I don't think that there is a very clear path for white. In theory, it exists a clear path for white to be better. So white tried and still trying different ideas here, but I wouldn't say that even some of them are pretty dangerous, cause some problems for black, but I don't think that there is one clear way, for white, where white is better, and basically which makes this variation unplayable. I don't see it. For instance, the idea that if white is just doing normal move knight f3, then of course that is the main idea for black, is to get b6, bishop a6, and the queen is already on a4, is a good place for the queen, and here black is doing fine. That's why white has two different options. One is very active, is to play queen g4, as we know already, asking black the usual question about the g7 pawn. Now probably king f8 is better than g6. g6, of course, seems to be, in some way it leaves black an option to castle one day, probably long side, but from another point of view, it weakens all those black squares on the king side, and makes quite a typical f6 idea for black in those positions. much more difficult to realize. So G6, it seems that after knight f3 here, according to theory, black experiencing some problems. Queen d1 is another option, yeah? Because the idea is queen g4, queen d1, yes, you lose to tempest, but now black cannot castle anymore short, yeah? Clearly that if he is doing it with a pawn on g6, it's not going to, it's probably going to lead to a mate. So Nc4, actually, this is not really a threat in this position because white most of the time has a very dangerous initiative. Let's say, including rook b1 is always useful, threatening check on b5, a6, and even c takes d4 simply. And queen takes d4, okay, you take the pawn, but something like that, I mean, you lose a lot of tempests, white develops castles, and black's position is rather critical, yeah, because of all those weaknesses on the black squares and, you know, development issues, and it's not clear what to do with the king in a long run on e8. So, but after queen d1, b6 still has to be played, and after h4, h5, of course, all those black squares are a bit worrying, this g5 square and so on, but you are in time to exchange the bishop on a6. That might be playable for black. I think knight f3 might be a more dangerous move because the idea is that after queen takes c2, white always has d takes c5, and again, you see it's even if black will maybe get the pawn on c5 and, you know, will lose few tempests to get this pawn, but then white will have a very powerful compensation for the pawn. So, or for instance, knight c6, you just play bishop e2, yeah, I don't like it for black so much, so I would recommend you to play king f8 here already. And again, yeah, with the idea that if queen d1, something with a queen on c7, which worked very well, but here b6, yeah, that's quite important. Queen on a4 is much better placed than queen on c7. b6 followed by bishop a6, that might be playable for black, even though, of course, always in those positions there is a danger, yeah, because of your king on f8. For instance, I think the main line according to computer is this, so bishop a6, you see very strange play, yeah, I mean, nobody's developed, but both sides are starting some active action in the center. C takes d5, for instance, bishop f1, king f1, e d5, okay, some kind of no castle chess variation, yeah, very strange position, both kings are in the center, hard to understand what's going on, pretty equal according to the computer. So queen g4, king f8, maybe white can try a very aggressive way of playing, knight f3, even though at least here I think having king on f8 instead of pawn on g6 it's to black's, it's in black's favor, so here situation is not so clear. Black is playing knight e7, and the idea is that, for instance, after bishop e2, so if queen takes e2, there is dc5 very often, but after bishop e2, he can start b6, play b6, and then if castle, trying to play bishop a6. And situation, yeah, it's not that clear. The position, even though, of course, yeah, from the white side, it's a very interesting way of playing and very ambitious. And yeah, it's if you analyze it and you like it, you find the potential white's attack very dangerous. Yeah, that is a way to play. But I couldn't find a clear way for white to be better in this variation in queen g4 line. And then the other way of playing is to force black to play c4. There are two ways of doing it. One is rook b1, and because of this very annoying bishop b5 idea, black has to play c4. And now actually, yeah, everybody's, I think, and computer recommends to play queen c1, knight c6, let's say bishop e2. Okay, what can I say about this type of position? I will talk about it maybe after the queen b1 instead of rook b1. But here, probably f6, I believe it's the best move, trying to quickly to get the play in the center. f4, let's say, and maybe even f5. And I think it can be a sort of positional draw. It will be very difficult for white to break through in this particular position once f4, f5 is played. Normally, my understanding of this position that it's better not to put the pawn on f4 for white here and to use the square for pieces So usually white should try to face f6 with some direct play, ef6 or something, opening up the position. But here, queen on c1, rook on b1 maybe are not the best pieces for it. Even though I would consider actually giving up this a3 pawn, just playing instead of queen c1, knight e2. Okay, let's say queen takes a3, knight f4. The thing is that it's still a pawn, obviously, but it's important for white to prevent f6 in this type of position. And this a pawn, as you see, it's not going too far. I mean, of course, if it gets to pawn endgames, then white has a problem, but probably it will not. Yeah, the game is very strategical. There are lots of pieces on the board. So, I mean, it's not that valuable, the a pawn. But so here, in exchange, for instance, white has a couple of tempes and maybe can organize the situation on the king side in the way he wants, yeah, to stop f6 at least. So let's say g6, bishop e2, followed by castle, and or h4, h5 sometimes. Hard to say, yeah, very complicated position, very strange, but I think that can be an interesting way to play with white. But normally white is playing queen b1, so the same idea. He wants bishop b5 check, and in case of a6, I think at minimum, yeah, white has queen b3. That's an idea, getting rid of this queen, and in case of exchange, then white should be better here just because of two bishops. So that sort of forces black to play c4. And now white has this rook on a1 protecting the pawn on a3. And now there is this typical strategical position arises, which is, yeah, I think you can study this as a type of position. It happens very often also in the knight f3 variations, when white is, instead of queen g4, just playing knight f3 in the main line. A strange position, I mean, in my opinion, well, it is, of course, it's only white who is pressing there, but it's extremely difficult for white to get something out of it, because once he starts his play on the king side, and that's the only chance for him, there is nothing to catch really on the queen side in this position, then black can always, white has to open up the position a bit. And his king is usually also whether in the center, whether on the king side. And black might get his counter chances. So black should try to make long castle, should never make short castle in this situation, because usually it leads to sooner or later to mate. So you should try to move his king to the other side of the board, and having f6 is a potential idea in these positions, always when white starts to regroup his pieces, and always to have the idea of f6 and trying to play in the center, because it doesn't really have too much counterplay, black, in this position. But it's also tricky, yeah, for white, if he's doing something a little bit not in the correct move order, or a little bit wrong way of putting pieces, then black can strike with his counterplay in the center. So I would say, for instance, how the play can develop: knight f3, knight c6, g3, for instance, bishop d7. Well, the b7 pawn is not hanging there, yeah, so not really. So f6, yeah, is a typical way of playing, but maybe here it's a bit premature, yeah. In general, it's a correct concept, but here maybe premature, because bishop h6, and after fe, maybe even knight g5 can be very dangerous. Yeah. So this position is a mixture of tactics and strategy. Yeah. So you need to be, yeah, there is no like one clear plan. You should always play f6 here. No, it depends on the situation. If it works, it can be a good move. Sometimes it can be a problem. Yeah. So normally bishop d7 here. Let's say bishop g2, long castle, short castle. Yeah. And now I think that, yeah, if black is passive here, like playing simply h6, queen b2, knight e7, well, that is a bit unpleasant. Let's say rook e1, and then white slowly starts to get his play well, he can always get his queen sooner or later via c1 back, and then he will, once f6 is not on the agenda, probably white will try to play maybe h4, h5, knight h4, slowly preparing, f4, f5. So still starts to play his play on that side, and black doesn't really have much counterplay. So even though it's still very solid position for black, not easy for white to break through, but it's kind of, one-sided play. So here, for instance, I would recommend black maybe to try to play f6. I don't know if it works or not. You need to investigate it. Let's say ef, and now if knight f6, probably white must be better, because after rook e1, knight e4 doesn't really work. White can always sacrifice in exchange, followed by knight g5. But maybe gf6 is not so clear. You say rook e1, for instance, rook e8. Followed, black wants to get knight e7, knight g6, e5. And in the meantime, of course, white has two bishops, so the position opened up a bit. And so there are a lot of tactical possibilities for white as well. Very strange, complicated position, again. But at least I don't see any clear way in this variation of queen a5, bishop d2, queen a4, where I would say, okay, this is just simply better for white, and you shouldn't play it. No, I mean, it's an interesting line. So if it's in your black repertoire, you can have a look at it. But the main move is knight e7, and here white has a conceptually different options. So one is just to play solid positional chess, knight f3, develop castle. I don't find it too dangerous. I think that I would definitely play this variation with black if I know that my opponents are playing knight f3 and so on. I'm much more worried about queen g4 variations, which requires a lot of course, theoretical knowledge, very concrete knowledge. But according to this modern state of theory, I wouldn't say that white is definitely better, but black is experiencing problems, definitely, after queen g4. Also, nowadays becomes fashionable just h4. This idea, very typical, just to push h5. Very often, black must play h6 when the pawn is on white's pawn is on h5, because h6 shouldn't, most of the time he should never allow g6 because of this weakness of the black squares on the king side. And then white often, using even his rook via h4, transferring it there. As I mentioned already, the king is pretty comfortable in the center here. So white is, okay, you can investigate it, this move. I saw there was, it becoming more and more popular. But I think that still, in my opinion, queen g4, even if it requires lots of work and memorization, but it's still the best move in the position, the most dangerous. So talking about the positional way of playing it, knight f3, it gives black quite many options, different in nature. For instance, one of the way of playing is queen a5, bishop d2, and now, for instance, c4. Even to play like this, you close the position, but there is no queen g4. Here it's very important that white doesn't have this idea of putting immediate pressure on the king side. And knight on f3, so I don't know, let's say a4, bishop d7. Now you don't have to put your queen on a4 anymore. So this is an option, probably maybe a bit better for white, but not. It's still a complicated position. Queen c7 is played very often. I actually, in my opinion, let's say queen c7, a4, h6 is interesting. In my opinion, this h6 immediately is actually a move which might be the best in this position. It's very useful, and so black is just waiting for white to what is he going to do, and probably preparing b6, bishop a6 idea as usual. So let's say against a move like bishop e2, black will just play b6 followed by bishop a6, and he will badly needs h6 move anyway to cover the g5 square. So usually after h6, I think white normally plays a4. But even though simply b6 and if a5, black even takes on a5 quite often. So black prepares bishop a6 here. As far as I remember, I tried to look at this, with white, tried to find advantage. I couldn't really find, so I was not so happy with white here, even though, of course, he can try different ideas, but there is big difference compared to those positions with king on f8, when, here, of course, one day, if black manages to exchange these bishops, he will just castle simply. Especially, still has to be careful not to get under direct attack, but most of the time he doesn't, and I think it's doing fine, this variation. So in general, knight f3 is not that dangerous in my opinion for black, but queen g4, that is an issue, this queen g4 move. So again, now, castles is a very risky move. Was extremely fashionable some 30 years ago. Now it's getting out of fashion slowly, because in general, as I've mentioned in this variation, when black castles short, he needs to be extremely careful not to get under direct, mating attack. A lot of theory here. Main move by far is bishop d3. So here, black's idea is to start, of course, attacking white center, and always to have this f6 idea, potentially, because queen is on g4. So here it's already black who is having an advantage in development, in this position. So the game, you need to know really move per move, becomes very, very often very tactical and very straightforward in many lines. Bishop d3 is a main move. Actually, I'm not sure that knight f3, it considers to be fine for black, but I was not that sure. Knight c6, bishop d3, a very logical way of playing. White is, by the way, threatening bishop takes h7 check, king h7, queen h5, knight g5, typical combination and mate. But according to theory, f5 is fine here, and after ef, rook f6, it seems that black is okay move per move in all lines. But I saw the computer games statistically. Computers are having a very good statistic here with a very strange move, queen g5. The idea is that if queen g3, so it's one of the, of course, concept for white is not to take on f6, to keep this pawn structure. Of course, with a pawn on f5, white's attack is not that dangerous, but still, strategically, of course, white has two bishops. All those black squares are potentially weak in black's camp. But queen g3, queen b6 is a problem, because now there are some issues just simply protecting the pawn on d4, and probably black is doing okay here. That's why computers found this tricky move, queen g5. So the idea is that after queen b6, you are not threatening to take on d4 because the knight on e7 is hanging. And in case of, let's say, h6, now or later, queen g3, bishop takes h6 is a threat. So it's like white is using a temp. White is just making accurate move, so he gains a tempi to castle and to protect the pawn on d4. Okay, good question is, what is this structure? c4, bishop e2? I don't know. It's... I think white is totally risk-free. He starts slowly to get his play on the king side. Probably quite dangerous for black. If white would have castled already, maybe it would have been much less dangerous. Here, white would definitely keep his king on the center and start pushing his h-pawn and slowly getting initiative. Maybe one day g4 will come. So quite dangerous for black. So I don't know. This has to be investigated, this position. If this is good for white, then there is no reason to study all those numerous lines after bishop d3. So bishop d3. Yeah, the thing is that once black plays c4, now white has bishop h6. And this position is not good for black at all. I will explain you later. So basically it will be a theoretical position. Very strange again. You see pawn structure, opposite color bishops, very strange position, but probably not good, because here white, of course, he will never castle. He keeps king at the center and starts his attack with h4, h5. So that is not good for black. Not recommended to play here c4. Actually knight bc6 is the main move. A very important move is f5. You need to know it with either color. Ef, rook f6, bishop g5. Now the game gets very direct, very direct, very tactical. If rook f7, queen h5, I think is important move, forcing g6 and then queen d1, knight c6, knight f3. So this position, again, it looks really terrible for black because all those black squares and so on, but it's not that bad. Artur Yusupov, he tried to play this type of position. I think just very often trying to put c4 and then queen f8, h6. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like the look of it, frankly, and probably it's objectively not too good. But e5 is a very critical line which you need just to analyze, move per move. Queen h4, e4, takes. Okay. Here, you need to study the series, switch on your engines, but I think finally bishop e2. Black has some play for the exchange, some very direct ideas, but all in all, according to theory, white is objectively better in this position. But this line is very important to know, for both colors. And after knight bc6, which is the main line with the idea knight f3, f5, now white's main move is queen h5, to stop f5. Actually, why I'm a bit skeptical about practical value of this variation with black, with the castle, that even if white is playing some strange ideas like bishop g5, for instance, trying to stop f5, obviously, queen a5, knight e2. Now if c4, white has bishop takes h7 check and queen h4 check and take on e7. So let's say cd4 and even f4. Okay, just giving up pawns and starting direct attack. Let's say dc, a long-term attack like castle followed by rook f3, rook h3. Okay, computers are holding there. They find a way to, I think, to make a draw here. Let's see if knight g6, queen h5 followed by rook f3. Maybe after f4 there is a b6 move. But the thing is that if you miss it in your analysis, you have to, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure. If you have to play it over the board, it's very difficult. It's so easy to get mated here, But objective queen h5 is considered to be the best move. Knight g6, knight f3, queen c7. Very strange idea. So you see, it's very important that now after knight g5, h6, and after knight takes f7, there is queen takes f7, and then f2 pawn is hanging. So that's why queen c7. And at least the main line of the series goes like this: bishop e3, c4 finally. Now if bishop e2, black immediately, of course, starts f6 to play with f6. And then gets enough counterplay here, but just move per move. I mean, strategically, it doesn't look good, this position, but move per move, it's not so easy for white. So white is taking on g6, have to take with f pawn, queen g4, and there are many games on this position. It doesn't look bad for black, I mean, but it's dangerous. For instance, the main line goes like queen f7, knight g5. Now queen f5 is not good because of queen e2, and g4 is a threat. It's threatening. And after, let's say, queen a8, for example. So white starts his play h4, trying to play h5. Sooner or later, his king stays in the center. And then slowly, if h6, knight h3, knight f4, maybe rook h3 sometimes. So he's slowly getting his play on the king side. The attack sometimes gets extremely dangerous, but also black has, this f5 square for the knight, certain potential counterplay with b5, a5, b4. So all in all, not an easy position, not so one-sided, but very dangerous. I mean, objectively, I think according to nowadays theory, it considers to be, I would say, if not better for white, but at least not so many players, the French players, so to say, players of French defense, they like to go for this position. But again, this line is not refuted. Still castle, there is no clear refutation. But Finally, so it comes to the variation like cd4. You can start with cd4, queen g7, rook g8, queen takes h7, and in any case, queen c7 is considered to be the best move here. Just not to allow, because white to put his knight on f3. Let's say if d takes c, then white would definitely have already his knight on f3. So that's why queen c7 is more accurate, and because of the threat of queen takes c3 check, white usually plays knight e2, and that would lead to the main line, which is queen c7. Yeah, that's another way to get it. This position, you are threatening c takes d4, so usually white takes on g7, rook g8, queen takes h7, c takes d4, knight e2 considers to be the main line. And now whether knight bc6 first, by the way, anyway, f4, white has to play, or d takes c3, f4, knight bc6. Okay, this is a big tabia, a very quite important tabia of this bishop b4 variation. Well, you really need to study. I mean, yeah, there is so much theory, so many forcing lines, so many possibilities. It's a very interesting position actually to play. The only problem is that because of the nowadays computers and because the theory advanced so much, yeah, it's pretty much becoming about opening preparation than really play. Otherwise, it's a position which I would be excited to play with either color, because yeah, it's very interesting. But nowadays, you know, if your opponent is better prepared than you might not really get to a game at the end of the day, simply. So because, yeah, but anyway, this is maybe the critical position of the whole bishop b4 system nowadays. And for instance, one of the white's ideas that he starts to push the pawn, black is starting to try to castle d4 and to organize play in the center. A very strange, very difficult position to play. You need to really to get not only the knowledge of the concrete variations here, but also just to get the feeling of how to play this position. For instance, queen d3 is one of the main lines, and now d4 is supposed to be the best. Now knight takes d4, takes on d4, takes bishop d7, if I remember correctly, and it just started the theory here. I mean, I remember trying to analyze this position at some point, and many lines would go till move 40, and I think black was always holding a draw here. But yeah, it's whether you like it or not, you're playing such lines which are extremely sharp, not so much control, and you know, I don't know, half of the success at minimum of playing this variation is how well prepared are you here. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, that is the state of affairs of the knight c3 bishop b4 system. Again, I'm presenting it to you from the very top professional level. Of course, it is perfectly playable on a level of 2000, 2200, even up to 2500. Probably you can definitely play it. Very interesting positions, very original play. If it's to your liking with black, at least, well, with white also, I can tell that this is a very, very serious attempt to get an advantage, is to play e5 and all main lines, but you also have to be aware of the fact that if you're playing all those queen g4 lines, you can get worse also if something goes wrong, or if you haven't studied it enough, those positions. So, but all in all, yeah, one of the, in my opinion, one of the most interesting and original opening variations. But I myself, when playing French defense, I was usually playing knight f6. So knight f6 is, there is more control. Black has more control on the position, but at the same time also white has more control. Yeah, in this knight f6 line, maybe nowadays it's a bit more fashionable than bishop b4. And let's investigate what's going on after knight f6. So now let us have a look at the knight c3, knight f6 system. It is much more solid if you can use this word, when you are talking about French defense, because there is always a certain strategical risk, especially when white pushes his pawn on to e5. But in any case, after bishop b4, the strategical and often tactical risk is pretty high for black, but also higher for white. Yeah. So after knight f6, the game is more positional. Not so many forced lines. There are some, but not that many. I would say the price of each move is not so high. But also it makes it a bit easier to play with white, those positions. So here there are two moves, two logical moves. One is e5 and another is bishop g5. Well, nowadays most of professionals, top players, are playing e5 here because there is it gives black less choice, and somehow the type of position which rise after e5 is probably more to the liking of most of players. But bishop g5 is a very serious option as well. I always playing white. I was always choosing e5 because after bishop g5, I felt like black has a too big choice of decent options. Yeah, so black has quite many systems, and none of those systems is refuted basically. Yeah, so maybe the rarest, the most rare line is bishop b4. A bit dubious, I would say, but still it's not refuted yet. It's a bit out of fashion nowadays, but still there is no clear refutation. The main line goes like this: e5, h6, bishop d2, takes on c3, bc3, knight e4, and some bit strange positions. Yeah, strange in general, not for a French player, because as you see already, quite often those kind of strange positions are arising in this opening. So queen g4, and now g6 sometimes they play, but that weakens a bit some squares on the king side. So more often king f8 is played, and bishop d3 takes on d2, c5, and so on. It's maybe it's a position which you need to study carefully. It's not easy to understand what is going on. Both kings are in the center. Again, no castle in chess. We see here. I've never played this line, never studied it really, but as far as I understand, it considers to be a bit more favorable for white, but not more than that. So that is one option. Another option is bishop e7. e5, that's white's idea, knight fd7. And now the old, kind of more classical way of playing is to take on e7, the most solid one, to play f4. Now c5 is premature because knight b5 is unpleasant. Knight gets to d6 with check after cd4. So castles and knight f3, c5. So from one side, it's actually quite nice for white to exchange this black color bishop, and to leave the white color bishops on the board, because as you all know already, that is the main problem of black in this opening, is what to do with this white color bishop. But from other point of view, it also makes black life a bit easier, because white lost 10 piece exchanging this bishop. So white probably is a bit better, but not that much, I guess. Bishop d3 is the main move, because now bishop takes h7 check, a very typical combination. Is often threatening. So h6 just in case to defend against it, and castles, knight c6, for instance. And cd4 is not such a big threat, because white can go knight e2 after. So now, for instance, white can play with the queen d2 or even queen e1. And if cd4, knight e2, knight c5, knight d4, bishop d7, queen e3, something like that. A very typical situation here. If you would have manage to exchange the bishops, now black would be perfectly fine, no problem at all. But having those bishops on the board, it's still black has to work a bit, to equalize. So that is a safe way of playing for white. But very interesting is h4 move. h4 seems to be a choice of many strong players now, including Kasparov. I remember he won against Korchnoi in rapid chess with this move. The idea is that, okay, now if you play h6, then on top of ideas like this, bishop e3 and queen g4, there is bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, f4. And so now when if black castles, then he can get under this very direct g4, g5 attack, which can be extremely dangerous. That's why most of the time black takes the pawn, bishop g5, h5, queen g5, and white simply has a kind of long-term compensation. So he's winning some tempos, developing the knight, attacking the queen, and then the h line, open h line, makes black life a bit more difficult. So it's difficult to castle. And there is nothing very forcing, so just some variations like this, for instance, as an example. Something like this, long castle, and white has initiative. Actually, statistics is pretty good for white in this position, even though it doesn't look like things are so clear. After all, pawn is a pawn. Or another way of playing is knight b5, queen d8, queen g4. You see this typical resource of French defense for white to attack this g7 pawn, g6, knight f3, a6, knight c3, and if c5, dc5. So white is playing for direct kind of attack, trying to use his development advantage in development and trying to create a very quick initiative. But okay, it's both of those moves, bishop b4 and bishop e7, are kind of old-fashioned. Most of the players nowadays are playing d takes e4, but neither of those moves are refuted, so also playable. But d4 is a more solid choice and actually quite logical. Knight takes e4, and now I think that knight bd7 system is at this moment of time, according to theory, is probably the best one. White cannot really find an advantage here, even though there are some interesting attempts. But bishop e7 is also very playable. Now bishop takes f6 is what white is playing. If he takes with a knight, then after bishop takes f6, he will have to exchange this bishop, because if bishop e3, then I guess c5 comes and black gets a very good version of a typical position, because white lost some tempos. And if you change bishops, here it's not much for white. Just too many pieces are exchanged, and it seems to be pretty comfortable equality. That's why white usually takes with a bishop, with the idea on bishop f6, of course, just to continue knight f3. But actually, after bishop f6, gf6 is also a very possible, very interesting system. That what Alexander Morozevich liked to play quite a lot. Knight f3. And strange position. Black has two bishops, a bit of compromised pawn structure, but two bishops is still worth something. So there are different ways of playing it now. Sometimes black is playing like b6, bishop b7, c6, knight d7, queen c7, slow chess, and trying to play long castle. I think Alexander Morozevich tried this a bit strange but interesting move a6. And for instance, after queen d2, the idea is to play f5, and if maybe knight c3, maybe you get b5, and bishop b7, and if knight g3, some ideas like h5. Very original play. I think Alexander had quite a number of games on this line, and with pretty good results. So it's perfectly playable, also for black. But bishop takes f6 is the main line. And now knight f3, castles, queen d2. So of course white's only chance here to fight for advantage is to make long castle and to start trying to attack black's king. And a huge theory here, knight d7, long castle, bishop e7 is the main move, bishop d3, b6, h4, bishop b7. So white has a certain control on the center, I mean, has a bit more space and potential attack on the king, but black has two bishops, c5 ideas, yeah, so he can get his own counterplay in the center. Lots of games are played here. Sometimes white would mate in a brilliant style, like I remember Judith Polgar more than once managed to mate black here. Sometimes black would black's counterplay would be more quicker and more efficient. So it's not so easy for white to give mate in this position. So all in all, yeah, white has certain chances for opening advantage here. So this line is not easy for black, but I think in the state of the theory, there is no clear way for, white hasn't proved yet an advantage in this line as well. But the safest, the most solid is knight bd7. That would be my recommendation for you if you want to play it with black, this variation. And here, let's say if knight takes f6 check is, proven to be not too dangerous, knight f3, h6, bishop h4, c5. This is, by the way, a transposition to the line third d takes e4. And it's a good transposition. Black is doing well here. So what white is trying to do is usually playing knight f3. The idea is that in case of h6, white's idea is now to play bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, and bishop d3. Somehow like this, and there are some chances for opening advantage, even though it's not clear if white has anything here. So the h6 is perfectly playable for black, but also bishop e7 now is an option, and the idea is after knight takes f6 to take with the bishop. So black wants to exchange those pair of bishops. If bishop e3, he probably is trying to play c5, hitting the center immediately. And now white's best try for advantage is h4, and then there is quite a long theory here in this variation. I think finally you have to study it. There are some direct lines here, but according to the modern state of theory, black is equalizing here also. So all in all, bishop g5, in my opinion, is less dangerous than e5. And if you're playing white, I think that e5 is also a more practical choice. There are less interesting, options for black. And if you're black, of course, all those lines are playable. But I believe that the best one is this knight e4, knight bd7, and it's quite difficult for white to get anything out of the opening if black is well prepared. That's why I would say that to me e5 after knight f6 is clearly the main move. Now knight fd7. Well, knight e4 doesn't work simply because white simply takes, plays bishop c4, then followed by knight e2, and sooner than later, he manages to take this e4 pawn. So after e5, the only reasonable move is to play knight fd7. And now white has, if white is just trying to develop pieces like this, knight f3, then c5, black is in time to, to bother white's center. And so let's say d takes c5, bishop takes c5, bishop d3, knight c6, attacking the pawn on e5, bishop f4, and now maybe even f6, I think, is the most logical move. And black is breaking in the center, and no problem for black in this particular line. This is an old line. Nobody plays anymore like this with white because it gives nothing, knight f3. But there is a strange, maybe, but very interesting move, knight c2. Now, that is, so the idea is after c5 to play c3. And Okay, knight on e2 is not extremely well placed, but also you can tell the same about the black's knight on d7. So white wants to keep this chain, yeah, pawn chain, knight c6. Here plays rather similar in a way to the third e5 line, yeah, in French defense. So the same story. White is a bit tied up with defending the d4 pawn, but he manages to get this dangerous pawn chain, the space advantage, and the position is extremely complicated here. Usually white is playing f4 because knight f3, black on top of normal moves like bishop e7, which are also perfectly playable. Black can try also to take on d4 and maybe even push f6 immediately, for example. I think it considers to be fine according to the theory, but also bishop e7 is not bad because again those f6 ideas are coming very often, and this d4 pawn is a bit weak. Yeah, so it's not so easy for white to prove an advantage, but maybe cd f6 is even more direct. So usually white is playing f4, just, again, with the same idea to keep this pawn chain in the center. And now, fortunately for black, he hadn't yet played queen b6, and that's not necessary, at least immediately. So what black is usually doing is trying to prepare and to push quickly f6. So let's say bishop e7, knight f3, you can start with f6 or start with a castle. And let's say if g3 then f6. White's main move, I think, here is bishop e3, because bishop h3 trying to attack the pawn on e6. Yeah, that is, of course, if black plays f5, then he has much less counterplay in the center. But I think here c takes d4 is fine for black. Okay, it's c takes d4, f takes e5. And bishop takes e6, check, king h8. Black has enough play there, according to theory, and in case of, let's say, d5, then he can already try to go knight c5, maybe trying to get the knight on e4. A very unclear position, very, very unclear. So bishop h3, cd, f5, I think it's totally fine for black. That's why white is trying to play bishop e3 here, or sometimes white even starts with bishop e3, f6, and now whether g3, whether h4, even like this. So a very strange play for white here, because not easy to finish his development, but also it's not so easy for black to create a very quick counterplay. Yeah, I think there was a very interesting game, which if you want to check the main ideas of this variation, very recent game from the candidate tournaments in Yekaterinburg between Van Hao and Grishuk. Very exciting game. You will enjoy actually studying this game, even if you are not planning to play this variation with either color. But I think it shows the complexity of the position, how complicated and unclear is the games. But anyway, it is a serious system. Knight ce2. Pretty double-edged, but principle, yeah, because of course in this pawn structure, if white finally manages, to develop and to keep this pawn structure, probably he will be better, yeah, because there is a significant space advantage. But he has some issues actually managing this, finishing the development. So f4 is a more usual move, and it's safer for white. So I myself always played f4 in this position. I had a few games with white in this variation. So f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. Well, yeah, hard to imagine black can manage without knight c6. Just that there is a system bishop e7, bishop e3, b6. It became rather fashionable at some point. I think it went already out of fashion. Frankly, I don't really believe, it's playable, but I don't believe it can be really good. It can equalize. Queen d2, it has its point. Queen d2 castle, maybe black sometimes want to play f6, maybe he wants bishop a6 in some situations. The idea is that if white hurries with long castle, then the black can play c4. That's a typical idea, which can be quite dangerous. That's why you have to be careful playing long castle when black can do c4 and then followed by b5 before. Very, very tricky. I prefer in general as white to avoid this. And I think that was a very interesting game. I played h4. That was my game against Buchmann, German grandmaster. I recommend you to have a look at it, just mainly for, first of all, understanding the typical ideas of this opening system, knight f6, e5, and also from the aesthetical point of view, it was one of the craziest games I ever played. So he played knight c6, and okay, you can see it. But in any case, bishop e7, b6 is a possible system, but I doubt it's going to be black's main weapon in future. So knight c6, logical move, bishop e3. Well, this is a position, I mean, strategically, what is white's idea? He just wants to keep the center. He doesn't mind if black changes c4, knight d4, bishop d4. So he just wants to develop pieces and having control in the center. And of course, black's only but a significant problem is the white square bishop, yeah? Because always in those positions, if you just remove those bishops, let's say if you exchange it or you have it like in Caracan, let's say bishop somewhere on g6 in some Caracan lines, of course, black would experience zero problems at all. But this bishop on c8, this white square bishop is always, a long-term problem for black. Otherwise, he has no weaknesses. He has a very healthy position. So, in many, many lines in this opening, it's all about that, yeah? So white wants just to develop, to keep control in the center, and then probably most of the time trying to organize some offense on the king side. And black usually is trying to do something on the queen side. And there are some very direct forcing lines, which you just need to know move per move, yeah? But probably quite much less than in the knight c3, bishop b4 variation. So here, let's check what are the options. First, let's go with queen b6, a very direct move, attacking the pawn on b2, also putting pressure on the center. Very logical, but it seems that white, even though there are a couple of options for black to investigate still, but it seems that after knight a4, queen a5 check c3, there is no way for black to equalize. Yeah, even if this knight on a4 is very worrying for white, I guess. But it seems that it works tactically because, for instance, in case of cd4, now very important is white has intermediate b4 move, and after queen c7, knight takes d4. It seems that white is better according to the theory. And after b4, there is a very old line which was very popular sometime in the 80s. Is knight takes b4, c takes d4, bishop takes b4 check, bishop d2. And I think black was trying to play b6 here, knight c5. It was before computer era. Yeah, even at that time, it was not considered to be good enough. And now with computers, they prove that white is better here. There is not enough compensation for the piece. So then after c3, what is now becoming kind of fashionable is to play b6. Okay, there is an old line also. Black can try to play c4, and white has to save his knight somehow before, and then black comes back to c7. Okay, as I've mentioned already, this in general, this pawn structure, when after black is playing c4 and white manages to keep control in the center with a pawn on c3, strategically it is quite dubious for black. I mean, here he has some ideas with b5, a5 counterplay, but all in all, in the long run, white has a space advantage, and I believe it's better for white. I think Evgeny Bareyev, he liked to play it at some point, beginning of 90s, he played this variation quite frequently. not without much success. He lost some games, and then he dropped it because I guess the type of play here is not very pleasant. Yeah, and I think the objective assessment of this position is that white is better. So then the latest trend is of players who still play this queen b6 line is to play b6, trying to play bishop a6. So white's best move is bishop d2 now, just attacking the queen. So if bishop a6 now is white has c4 idea, yeah. So it doesn't work anymore. That's why after bishop d2, probably the only reasonable move is c4. b4 again, yeah, trying to save this knight. And now again, queen a6, bishop e2, yeah, not very funny this position. Bishop e2 or even a3 if you want first. I just don't think that it's strategically sound. I don't like it with black, even if computers sometimes can say that it's not too bad, but humanly, yeah, it's a difficult position to play at the very least, yeah. So knight takes b4, that was a new discovery. c4, bishop takes b4, queen c2, pretty forced. And let's say now takes on d2, knight takes d2, b5, knight c3, b4, and let's say knight d1. There were some games. I remember first time I saw this line played on the high level. It was during Dortmund tournament. Caruana Friedman was a game, and it's a very strange position. Again, only 2 pawns for the knight, but black has quite advanced pawns, c4, b4. Then usually he's trying at some point to push his a pawn also. All in all, it's not too bad for black, but finally, if you analyze this position, you start to understand that it's actually is playing for a draw. Yeah, there is not much. If white knows what he is doing, finally black is just trying to push his pawns, and he doesn't have too many winning chances, and probably objectively it's in white's favor. But again, depends on the level you play. Otherwise, you definitely have some winning chance. I mean, the position is very unusual, very non-standard, and if white doesn't really know this variation, doesn't know how to play it, then you can also win with black. So from practical point of view, I think in theoretical stand of queen b6 is not very positive for black at this moment of time. But in a practical sense, there are some strange positions which you can try with black, and especially in internet games and Rapid. It's not yet totally clear, yeah. But still, I would, for serious chess on the high level, I would not recommend this move. But you at minimum playing white, you need to know very well all those lines because they're quite sharp. Then c takes d4. That is another way of playing. Knight takes d4, and now, the old kind of main line was bishop c5 here always. Queen d2 is the best move here. So white is preparing long castle, and now, there is a line taken on d4, takes on d4, and queen b6. I would say it was actually quite popular at some moment of time because rising endgames, of course, the endgames are slightly better for white because of the bishop, because of the white square bishop, but it's very difficult to win it, so black has quite good drawing chances in those endgames, even though, it's a little bit sad, to play like this with black, immediately to go into a slightly worse endgame, but just to hope that, you make a draw. And it's true, there are good drawing chances, but still it's far from a draw. For instance, white can do it in this way, playing knight b5, takes on d4, something like that, king e7, king d2. And by the way, one of the typical maneuvers now is knight b8, knight c6, maybe for black, trying to get rid of this knight on d4. Or another way is more common, I think, is just taking on b6, for instance, and playing knight b5. So just getting the knight on b6, that this knight will not go to c6 via b8. And something like this. That's kind of line like this. And white is playing b3, king d2. Has to be very careful about all sorts of g5, f6 ideas, just to be sure that he has something, that, he keeps this pawn chain. Difficult to win it. Of course, black has more drawing chances than white winning chances, but again, as I said already, a little bit sad to aim directly from the opening with black to this kind of position, which with basically under normal circumstances, 0 winning chances. But then on the top of it, then the queen d2 move was found at some point. And actually it is also quite dangerous, and maybe black holds, because if black doesn't take on b2, just playing, let's say, knight c5, lone castle, then you get to quite a typical position, which is slightly better for white, and then there is no point to play exactly this line. But so because the idea of exchanging on d4, playing queen b6 to change queens, and in case if white avoids it, then to take the pawn on b2, but then this position is very, very sharp and needs to be analyzed, especially nowadays with powerful machines. I don't know what is the final verdict here, because for quite some time, check, rook c1. This is the starting point of some games. I think the last game I found in my database, among humans at least, was 2006, but there was some strong players playing this line with white, like Magnus Carlsen and Alexei Shirov. It needs to be checked. Of course, if this is strong, then this taking on d4 and queen b6 line becomes really not very attractive, but maybe it's okay for black, and it's kind of forced draw, who knows. But all in all, a little bit sad line to take on d4. That's why most of the players, they are trying to castle now, lone castle, and then a6. So this is kind of sort of Sicilian type of play. Black wants to take on d4, play b5. White is starting his play on the king side. So sharper, but not really Sicilian, because usually you have pawns on e4 and d6 in Sicilian. Here, I think with time, at some point it was very popular and actually even considered to be quite good for black. But with time, I think there are some quite annoying ideas which white found. One of it is queen f2, which is, by the way, my invention. I first started to play it beginning of, I think, 2002, maybe 2003. And it's a very serious move. So for white player, I can recommend you to study this move. It gives it still considers to be quite dangerous for black and not easy to equalize. But then computers, even they prefer knight b3 here. Little bit strange to move the knight away from the center, and the positions seemingly look not so clear, but actually computers have a very, very high statistics here. I mean, like maybe 70% for white, which is a lot for computer games. So maybe it is the most dangerous move objectively, even if practically black definitely has his chances because the position is still very complicated. But so after knight b3, the idea that if you exchange these bishops, then black doesn't have that much counterplay anymore. Bishop d3, and also bishop b7, on top of the fact that white can just play very positionally, king b1, and just slow positional game. But also the typical idea I wanted just to show you how white can create an attack in this position is, let's say, playing queen h3, and now black has a not easy choice whether to play h6, which can immediately or a couple of moves later run to g4, g5, very dangerous attack can start, or to play g6, but then queen will go out, maybe I guess h6 even here, and then h4, h5 comes. So all in all, bishop e3 is a bit dubious. So usually black is trying to remove the bishop to e7, sometimes to b4, trying to provoke a3, but white is not forced to play a3 in this position. Because some years ago it was considered to be quite unclear. Looks like black has a lot of counterplay here and so on. So looks a bit dangerous for white. But now, looking at computer games, I was surprised how careless they are about black's play. So it's like they just don't believe black has much play in this position. And according to the statistics of the game, probably they are right. So objectively, again, humanly, it looks totally unclear. Yeah, because black has knight b6, knight a4, b4. Seems like lots of counterplay. But computers are not very impressed. So they play, for instance, bishop d3, knight b6, for example. So white is just trying to start h4, h5, sometimes rook h3, just starting actually rather slow attack on the king side. And yeah, it's amazingly enough, it's very difficult for black to create real threats. Yeah, on the queen side. For instance, yeah, by the way, one of the typical ideas that if black plays b4, then of course in case of knight e2, a5, then he can very often get, some quick play on the king. But what you need to know that very often, unless you have a problem, immediate quick problem with a knight on a4, like for instance, the knight on c6 and b3 are exchanged, then bishop b7, bishop c6 can become a problem. But otherwise, the knight a4 is a very powerful square for the knight because it's like totally blocking all counterplay here. And that's what black shouldn't allow in this position. So normal way maybe for black to play is to play knight b6. And now, yeah, usually queen f2 or even queen e1, usually queen f2. That was the way people were treating this position before, then sometimes trying to play bishop c1, slowly organizing his play on the king side. But black has some ideas like knight a4, for instance. Yeah, maybe it's still in white's favor. But now I notice that computers, they even don't care. Yeah, they just play h4, bishop d3, and they don't care about anything. Knight c4, b4, they're not a threat. I guess on b4, probably what can be very unpleasant is bishop takes b6. And in case of bc, bishop d8. And if queen b6, again, knight a4, very powerful knight on a4. And otherwise, knight c4, I guess I'm not worried at all about knight c4. I don't know, I guess just taking on c4. All in all, you should study this position if you want to play it. And it's playable for black. If you are not playing a top super tournament. But objectively, I guess it's in white's favor. So that finally those cd4 lines and bishop c5 now are, at least on the highest level, are out of fashion. I think black is experiencing quite serious problems in those lines. But queen b6, this line becomes extremely fashionable nowadays. And maybe it even objectively equalizes, but I always found myself quite difficult actually forcing to analyze, even not even mentioning to play this line. And I think you will see now why. So after queen b6, white's best move is queen d2. Because now knight a4 already doesn't work. There's an important difference compared to the line when black plays queen b6 before he takes cd, because here queen a5 check, the best probably is to come back knight c3, but that is not an option, of course. But after c3, white is just worse. After knight takes d4, the point is that wherever piece you take on d4, then b5 comes, and after b4, now already bishop takes b4 is possible, and black is just better. So don't confuse if you are white when exactly black plays queen b6, before or after cd. So then there is another option to play a3, because of course queen takes b2 is not working. The queen is trapped after knight a4. But after a3, bishop c5, and now the main line goes like this: knight a4, queen a5 check. White can also come back to c3, and I'm not sure if black has anything better than queen b6. But if you're playing white, I guess you don't want to make a short draw. But c3 doesn't bring white anything after bishop takes d4, takes, queen takes d4. So now at least if b5, white has knight c5 and he is better. But the best move here is b6. I mean, black wants to go bishop a6, and the knight on a4 is really badly placed. So maybe white's best option is to play queen b4, changing queen. There is some theory here. White was trying a bit here to fight for advantage, but it's not very realistic with such a bad knight on a4. So, but at least white can equalize with a3. But the best move is queen d2. Sacrificing the pawn, queen takes b2, otherwise queen b6 doesn't make much sense. So queen takes b2, rook b1, queen a3, bishop b5. Well, there are other moves possible also, but believe me, computers made a lot of work already in this variation. So all those moves are the best ones. Bishop b5, black has to take on d4. Bishop takes d4. Now a6 is the only reasonable move. Because after bishop b4, rook b3, queen a5, a3, it's already proven by computers and humans that white is better here. So the best is a6, take on d7, or first rook b3, probably it maybe leads to the same, but better take on d7, just to avoid additional options for black. Bishop takes d7, now rook b3, queen a5 is not working because of bishop b6, just losing the queen. So black has to retreat to e7, and now rook takes b7. Okay, this is a position which now is very fashionable in the French defense, in the knight c3, knight f6 variation, and it's not easy for white to prove with advantage. By the way, recently it was played by Alexander Grishuk in candidate tournaments, Yekaterinburg against Alexeyenko. So, yeah, so to say, computer-wise, black has chances to equalize. But frankly, I just cannot look at this position without disgust. Being black, yeah, because white has everything. You know, white has better development, control on the center, a very active rook on the b file, the potential ideas of playing f5. I mean, it just looks so bad that it's very, very strange to me that, in fact, it's not easy for white to prove his advantage. But in any case, yeah, I just cannot commit myself to analyze and really to play this variation with black. But if you don't have those superstitions yourself, actually this variation is now considered to be maybe the best line in this variation for black. You have to study a lot of games to analyze it with powerful computers, because if you miss one move, game gets extremely complicated and tactical in many lines. So if you miss one move with black, you can just lose a game out of preparation. So if you like it, yeah, you can definitely try to make it work for black. But I find it a bit, difficult myself. So that is a CD4 line. And then otherwise, black has a choice. There are two lines which are quite similar to each other. Before, some years ago, a6 was by far the main line here. But now bishop e7 move is a little bit more popular. But very often it leads to a similar type of position, sometimes even exactly to transposes to each other. So let's start with a6. Queen d2, a normal move, b5. So black is not hurrying with his development, because, well, after white very often would take on c5 anyway, so black doesn't want to lose a tempi, and he wants to take on c5 from f8, with a bishop on f8. But now, okay, this system is perfectly playable. White has many options here, different in nature. So some are more solid, like d takes c5. Some are more complicated, like moves, for instance, like a3. So you need really to study this position. I mean, to understand strategical ideas of this position. It's pretty rich of ideas. For instance, after a3, one of the main lines is queen a5. So black, strange move, but black wants to get b4. to get his play on the king side. And for instance, dc5, bishop c5, exchanging on c5. If before there is knight takes b4, so knight d4, and some direct lines also like this, knight a4, for instance, seems to be enough to equalize for black. White can also play bishop d3, a move which became quite fashionable nowadays, not even bothering about black's counterplay. And for instance, one of the most kind of popular lines now is against how to face it is to play b4, knight a4, c4, bishop e2, c3. As the idea is after b takes c3, I guess black wants to play queen a5, obviously, yeah. So after c3, white is playing queen d1, and he wants to play b3, probably cb, knight b2. So this position is also interesting and difficult to assess, because from one point of view, black managed to create some weaknesses, and on the queen side. From other point of view, white finally managed to keep his center, this d4, e5, f4 pawn chain, and he will slowly castle king h1 and start to get some activity on the king side. Black will definitely continue on the queen side. So interesting position, hard to understand if it's better for white or not. Check the games. The old main line and still a fashionable move is d takes c5. Black's problem is that taking with a knight, a very typical idea for this variation, then queen f2 comes, and it very uncomfortable, not clear what to do with a knight on c5. Yeah, there is no good way to protect it, or no good square to land for this knight after queen f2. That's why bishop takes c5 is the main move. And now there is a new idea which was found, because that for quite a long time was considered to be fine for black, because the main line will usually what white would do is trying to play like this. So let's say take, and now queen f2, for instance, or bishop d3. Then black would play b4, a5, and so on. Yeah. So let's say queen f2, queen b6 now already. Bishop d3. Okay, the endgame after knight takes d3 is dubious for black because of this white square bishop, but black would create his counterplay like this, then followed by bishop a6, and it seems that he's doing fine here. But then some years ago, somebody, I guess it wasn't human, who found bishop d3 move here. Of course, it's not the move which comes to your mind, because it looks like it's a blunder. Black can just play d4, but strangely enough, after knight takes d4, it seems that then followed by bishop e4, white gets back. Yeah, I mean, in fact, white is just winning the pawn. So d4 doesn't work. And the idea is that after queen b6, there is another subtle move, bishop f2. I guess also found by computer, very subtle play, but this variation is, so the idea is that, of course, after b4, why white doesn't hurry taking on c5 is that he wants, of course, to get the knight to a4. As I mentioned already, this is a very nice square very often for the knight. And let's say if you cannot really take this knight, and you cannot here because I can play b3, then this knight is really controlling, the flank, and it's difficult to create counterplay for black. But black has some options after bishop f2. I think the main move is bishop b7. This is an interesting line for white. He has chances for opening advantage, but black is also doing more or less okay. I mean, even if white has something, it will be not too much. And then what is the variation bishop e2 here is something which is quite practical for white to study, I believe, because you can do it also against bishop e7 system. So this thing you have in any case, this line. And I will consider it via bishop e7 move order instead of a6. Yeah. And so that is maybe would be my recommendation for you to play it with white if you like that type of position which arise after this bishop e2, because like this, then you you can have it against both a6 b5 system and against bishop e7 system. But at the same time, I must say that it's not, black also has decent chances to get a normal game, to equalize, so it's also playable with black. So, and because here anyway, probably sooner or later, maybe first bishop b7, but anyway, bishop e7 will have to be played, because again, the idea is that if before, then already knight a4, also knight d1 is possible, but knight a4 is quite good, to have the knight on a4. So sooner or later bishop e7, and then we will transpose to this line, which I want to show you now, which is bishop e7. So black starts sometimes with bishop e7, probably, or a6, queen d2, bishop e7, it leads to the same. So queen d2 is the best move, because if white starts with bishop e2 here, then I think that the idea that black is just in time to equalize by castle and f6 immediately. And, since he haven't lost time playing a6, it seems that it's good enough to equalize for black, because after ef, knight takes f6, black has enough play here. It's a quite direct line. I think this, if d takes e5, knight g4 works. So that's why for white probably it's better to start with queen d2. There is dc5 move, kind of delicate move order, but you can check it. It makes sense also, but queen d2 is the most logical. And now a6. Now if black starts with a castle, that would be nice, because it's a way to fight against the bishop e2 system, because I guess on bishop e2 you again probably you have f6 here, most probably. But the main problem, or even b6 castles f6, so there are some ideas. You don't need so much a6 anymore. But after castle, that's a very important nuance of move orders, that now d takes c5 becomes a problem, at least according to the theory, immediately, exactly here. Because if you start d takes c5 here, I think bishop takes c5 is a problem, because you will see the difference soon, because after queen d2, black has queen b6, and it's quite important that he is in time to get this takes, which is not completely the case in the other variation. So that's why after castle dc5, because bishop c5, now you have castle, and what makes the difference that after queen b6, white can actually simply play knight d4 if he wants. Threatening knight a4, and I wouldn't say that it gives a big advantage to white, but still this position. You remember, it reminds the CD bishop c5 line, but it's much better for black not to castle too early in this line, to have the king in the center. So that is supposed to be slightly better for white, this position. So bishop takes c5, castles, probably also after, by the way, after queen b6, I think there is a strange move bishop g1, which is also interesting. I think it was played in some of the games. So the idea is that after bishop takes g1, rook takes g1, white wants to use this rook to get a kind of tempi. But mainly queen b6, knight d4 is a problem. Not a huge problem, but not something, black doesn't play this line just to end up in a slightly worse endgame and to fight for a draw. So, and let's say if you take on a3 or queen a5 first, a3, a6, king b1, sooner or later you will take on a3, queen a3, and it's very difficult to organize real play for black on the king side, because let's say after b5, white actually starts to play quite positionally. So maybe he can start with bishop d3 even, because probably bishop takes h7 is a serious threat. But even if knight d4, and then if you don't manage to get b4, then let's say you can take with a queen or rook. It's I'm afraid black can end up with this eternally bad bishop on c8, and even sometimes white can play b4 in such positions. Strangely enough, just let's say if rook b8, even b4 is possible, and then bishop d3 and so on. It's quite difficult to organize a serious play with this bishop on c8. So all in all, knight takes e5 usually is played here, and then long castle. And this position, let's say a6, king b1, there were games here, and it seems that it's very difficult for black to create real counterplay because, again, the most important point, after b5, there is always queen f2. Very unpleasant move. So queen a5 is usually played here, at least to try b5, b4, but then looks like h4, b5, and now one of and actually the best probably option is just to take on c5 and play bishop d3. Looks a little bit strange to give up this bishop, but in fact, white's attack is very dangerous. I think he's already threatening bishop takes h7 check. For instance, if black is trying to do something like that, I guess already bishop takes h7 check might be simply winning. I don't know, knight g5 check, king g8, queen d3 with a terrible attack. Yeah, I mean, and in case of g6, h5, probably it will end badly for black here. So that's why castles considers to be dubious because of dc5, and that is the reason why in this position black usually starts with a6 here. So waiting, if you remember, yeah, what I said, that long castle is always very dangerous here, because then immediately black would just push c4 followed by b5 and b4. So the king is in danger on c1. Therefore, and if d takes c5, knight takes c5, now the difference is quite serious after black, let's say if white plays castle. So now queen a5 is king b1, b5. And it's very important that black haven't castled yet, because, for instance, bishop takes c5 already is not too dangerous. Bishop takes c5 and there is no mate, bishop d3, there are no threats. So that's why usually here the position is quite unclear, I would say. For instance, white can try to play h4 still, but b4, one of the possible options, knight e2, knight e4, queen e1, maybe rook b8. Well, again, king is actually a bit safer for the moment in the center on a8, and black has potential threats, even some kind of knight c3 check ideas can come. So this position is pretty unclear. That's why after knight takes dc5, knight c5, a3, I think that was what I played once a few years ago against George Meyer. That was a new idea at that time. Now it became kind of fashionable, is to play a3. So you see there is a lot about move orders in this position, quite subtle position. So my idea was that in case of b5, I wanted to play queen f2, a very typical, as you already know, idea, leaving black with a headache of what to do with the knight on c5. And after castles, which is logical, because the idea is that if white now makes his castle, of course, a3 might become an issue. Yeah, b5, b4 can come at some point. But my idea was to play queen f2, a very tricky move, which was a novelty at that time. And I think that if my opponent went knight d7 at some point, then bishop d3, of course, this is already a big achievement for white. And I managed to win the game. Very interesting game, by the way. You can check it. I think it was 2016 Olympiad in Baku, my game with white against George Meyer. But actually, I knew already when I found this novelty and analyzed it that there is a very interesting way of playing, is to play b6 here. And after b4, which is the idea, I mean, again, knight d7, bishop d3. Actually, that was he played. He played b6 first, before, and he quickly played knight d7 because couldn't see any other move, and bishop d3, and then, then probably white is better here. But actually, after the critical maybe line is b6 before f6 here. Incredible piece sacrifice, which computer, of course, quickly shows, and it's incredibly messy position, very difficult to understand what is going on. Another option for white is, by the way, to play long castle here. it's a bit it's a bit risky with the pawn on a3, but also it's interesting for white. So that is one line which you have to check with black carefully if you want to play this variation, and to be you can choose it as with white as your main weapon against bishop e7 a6 system, but you need to analyze it carefully. But I quite like bishop e2 system also. I mean, that is a very solid choice, and quite easy to play with white. So bishop e2, finally this or that way, b5 immediately, or first castle, it gets to this position. f6 is already not working so well here. That is very important with a pawn on a6. Now you can simply take on f6 and take on c5, and it seems that black doesn't have enough to equalize here. That's why b5, a3, again, sooner or later probably the move will be played. And now this typical position arises. There are many games, especially many computer games on this line. What can I say? I wouldn't say that white is better. No, I mean, I was actually ready to play it with black also, but it's more positional game. Sometimes it gets tactical and complicated in some lines, but in general, white has quite good control on the situation here. The main idea, okay, black wants just to develop, to create some counterplay on the queen side and sometimes in the center. Quite rarely f6 is already not working most of the time. So, and white's main plan is to very often to play knight d1 in this position, and then trying to maneuver the knight to f2 or e3 sometimes after bishop f2, knight e3, and to play c3 one day, just again, to keep this control in the center. So how the game can develop, for instance, queen b6, one of the moves, I think it was played by Caruana in Blitz or Rapid against Duda maybe a year ago. But I think now knight d1 is a critical move here, with the idea that after, if black tries to exchange, then c3 is very important. And again, you keep control on in the center, and the same goes after a5, c3. So normally the main line is bishop b7, and now again probably knight d1. Of course, white has all kind of useful moves like king h1, always possible, but rook d1, king h1. So it's a complicated position which you can study, analyze, and there are many games of strong players also played here. But let's say knight d1, and then sooner or later probably black will take on d4, cd4, knight d4, and here black is playing queen c7, knight f2, let's say knight c5. So black wants to play knight e4 at some point to open up the d line and to try to equalize. Of course, it's not much for white here. I mean, it cannot be too much, but it's also not so easy to equalize fully with black. So rook ac1, for instance, just to show you as an idea, very interesting idea, which computer likes, a subtle move. So let's say when, and probably black will sooner or later do this, then the pawn on c2 is not hanging, and rook on c1 is supporting white playing c4. So he can do queen e3, or takes queen e3 followed by c4, and so on. Quite often black is trying to play f5 here. It's probably with a very accurate play, black should be able to equalize slowly, but white is also very solid. So all in all, what can I say about knight f6 line? It's definitely playable for black, but white also has quite good control here, especially in the main line with the 4 knight f3, bishop e3. It's healthy positional play. I used to play with black this line, but I even liked it even more with white. But anyway, it is playable. So I just wanted to show you all the nuances of this line, of bishop b4, in general of the French e4, e6, French defense. A very interesting opening, very rich, a lot of different ideas. I think it's anyway very useful for any player to know something about French defense, because it also, in a way, even if you're not going to play it, but in a way it is helpful just to understand chess. Quite a lot of strategical ideas in chess, so very rich opening. I tried my best to give you a certain overview of this for both colors, for white and for black. And now we are going to move to Caro-Kann defense, which is again now becoming more and more popular, and actually not so easy for white. White is struggling nowadays to find any clear way for to get an advantage. So maybe objectively, Caro-Kann is a little bit, at least according to the modern state of theory, is a little bit superior to French. But anyway, the French defense is a conceptual choice. You have to like it. If you want to play it with black, you have to like this type of games, those type of positions which arise there. So again, it's very special opening. And I, from time to time during my chess career, I was coming back to this opening, trying to play it because there is something. There is something again in this opening, some type of play which you probably cannot find in any other existing opening. So I hope I help you to first of all to like this opening, and in case it will appear with either color white or black, hopefully this quite extensive overview will be very useful for you to understand all those complicated strategical ideas and all those nuances with move orders and typical patterns playing either color.